Forensic pathologist Dr. Frederick Zagaby has investigated many gruesome crime scenes as chief medical examiner for Rockland County, New York.
My area was mechanism, manner, and cause of death, and type of suffering the individual has.
Since 1940, Dr. Zagaby has been investigating the shroud to answer a fundamental question. Does the evidence on the shroud match up with a person who died by crucifixion? First, the doctor built a cross to determine how crucifixion killed people. The assumption was that the victim suffocated until weight of his own body. But the doctor's experiments suggested otherwise.
The cause of death was due to shock, which causes failure of the heart as a pump.
Next, he looked at how the nails were driven through the hand. The shroud shows a pool of blood near the wrists. But are human hands nailed to a cross strong enough to support a crucified body? The doctor designed special gloves to find out. His tests revealed the nails would support the body. But he also made another startling find. The Roman practice of nailing the victim's palms to the cross would have ruptured the median nerve, turning the thumbs inwards. A careful examination of the shroud revealed exactly this. The thumbs were hidden underneath the palms, just as one would expect in a crucifixion. There were a number of other clues that the doctor's investigation found in the shroud.
Looking at the face, it was not symmetrical, showing evidence of a beating. I looked at the angulations of the blood in the head region where the crown of thorns was. The blood flows going along where the muscles will contract, and they had a corkscrew appearance. The blood shows a flow in the back of the hand, and it runs nicely along the side, and it accumulates a pool. I've seen it in many, many cases of injury to the hand in the medical examiner's office.
From his research, the doctor came to one overwhelming conclusion about the image on the shroud.
From the forensic pathology point of view, it is totally consistent with a crucified individual. I have no doubts at all.
Dr. Zagaby's tests and the photographic evidence matched up. The victim on the shroud had been crucified. But was it Jesus Christ or a medieval man? To answer this crucial question, scientists had to find out how old the shroud was, and that required the cooperation of the Catholic Church. In 1988, scientists lobbied for permission to take a sample of cloth for carbon dating. Unknown to them, Pope John Paul II was already consulting his own scientific advisors and had reached a decision.
I was in Rome at the time, and there was this real tension, this real controversy as to whether this should be subjected to scientific tests. I mean, if this is the burial shroud of Jesus, is that not an indignity to what is the only physical link to the Savior? And others would say, well, look, if this is a fraud, we need to know one way or another. And John Paul II, to his credit, and the Vatican, to its credit, said, no, we're going to put this to the knife, literally.
It was a historic decision. Scientists were finally given permission to carbon date the shroud. For this test, the sample would have to be burned. Permanently destroying a piece of the shroud was a highly controversial action. The church authorities imposed strict conditions on the scientists, only allowing a small sample to be cut from a damaged corner of the shroud.
It was a convenient choice. It was in an area of a cloth that nobody was going to complain about. Nobody was going to take issue with the fact that they're pulling threads from the more pristine parts of the cloth.
The section removed from the damaged corner was divided into four. One piece was sent to Oxford University, another to the Swiss Institute of Technology in Zurich, and two smaller pieces were sent to the University of Arizona. Dr. Tim Jung was a member of the Arizona team.
Everybody and all the plants and all the animals on the surface of this planet have approximately the same amount of carbon-14 in them as long as they're alive. When we die, the C14 in our bodies decays with a known decay rate. If we measure the carbon-14 in the sample and compare it to a standard, we can calculate the age from the ratio of the sample to the standard.
First, the shroud sample was cleaned of any impurities. Then, it was burnt.
We start off with a piece of linen, and we combust at this end, turning the carbon of that sample into a gaseous state.
The CO2 gas was then solidified, and the carbon was extracted. Each carbon sample was then shot through an accelerating mass spectrometer, which counted each individual carbon-14 atom.
This particle detector can count one atom at a time. For a modern sample, we count upwards of 100 atoms per second. For an old sample, one that's close to 50,000 years, we may count 5 or 10 atoms in 2 minutes.
By counting the number of atoms, scientists calculated the date. For the test, each lab worked in isolation. Finally, after checking and rechecking their results, they had the answer. They knew how old the shroud was.
We wanted to make sure we were right, so we measured it more times than we would regularly, and we knew that it wouldn't be 2,000 years old after 5 minutes. The Shroud of Turin turned out to be a medieval sample from the 14th century, and that's what the radiocarbon date shows.
The shroud was dated between 1260 and 1390. The result was a stunning revelation, making headlines around the world. It was now a scientific fact. The Shroud of Turin could not be the burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth. Despite the evidence, many of the faithful refused to accept the carbon dating results. Their belief in the shroud was unshakable. And soon they made a discovery that cast doubt on all the scientific work.